say no!
DC gun ban has to go!
Outside the Supreme Court, the battle was still being fought as the decision was announced. The 5-4 ruling overturned Washington, D.C.'s ban on handgun ownership and explicitly stated for the first time that the Second Amendment guarantees an individual's right to own a gun for self-defense.
More handguns in the District of Columbia will only lead to more handgun violence.
Washington Mayor Adrian Fenty's disappointment was palpable.
Why don't we do away with the court system and go back to the old West? You have a gun and I have a gun, and we'll settle on the streets.
Chicago Mayor Richard M. Daley braced for an attack on his city's gun law.
This is a very frightening decision for America.
Within 24 hours, the National Rifle Association and other like-minded groups had filed lawsuits against Chicago and San Francisco. Their aim? To test whether the court's decision has implications for all 50 states, not just the District of Columbia.
The NRA views this as the opening salvo in a step-by-step process of bringing relief to citizens all over the country that have been denied equal access to this freedom.
Wayne LaPierre is Executive Vice President of the NRA.
The Second Amendment as an individual right becomes a real permanent part of American constitutional law, and that's monumental.
How did it happen? Why this particular case? Why now? It took exactly the right cast of characters, perfect timing, and the determination of a lawyer named Robert Levy, who knew just how to play the game.
The financing of this came out of my pocket.
Levy's story is remarkable. He got rich in finance, but cashed out and went to law school at the age of 50. He's now 66. This is the only lawsuit he's ever litigated. He's never even owned a gun.
The gun part of it is, I don't know that I'd say it was incidental, but certainly my primary interest was in vindicating the Constitution and the meaning of the Second Amendment.
Here he is celebrating his victory. That's the Second Amendment written out on the cake. Levy is a libertarian, a senior fellow at Libertarianism's Philosophical Brain Trust, the Cato Institute in Washington.
We believe in free markets, individual liberty, private property, and most of all, strictly limited government. We don't like the government in our wallets, and we don't like the government in our bedrooms. So we're very happy to be a bridge between the left and the right, particularly on this issue, which has separated so many on the left and right.
Levy deliberately distanced himself from the NRA.
We didn't want to identify with the usual gun lobby groups. This was a case that we brought because of our interest in the Constitution. It was primarily a constitutional case.
And I'm very happy that now I'm able to defend myself and my household in my own home.
Levy handpicked his plaintiff, security guard Richard Heller, and then calculated that the Supreme Court would move to the right before the case managed to get there.
Well, when we filed the case in 2003, Justices Alito and Roberts had not yet joined the court. But it did appear that over the near term there would be replacements of Chief Justice Rehnquist, and Justice O'Connor had also suggested that she might retire. And of course, that did come to pass.
And in Justice Antonin Scalia, who wrote the majority opinion, Levy had the perfect match with his own strict originalist views of the Constitution. In other words, what the Founding Fathers intended.
Sometimes people come up to me and inquire, you know, Justice Scalia, when did you first become an originalist? You know, as though it's some weird affliction. You know, when did you start eating human flesh?
This was Scalia on 60 Minutes recently.
What you're saying is let's try to figure out the mindset of people back 200 years ago, right?
Well, it isn't the mindset. It's what did the words mean to the people who ratified the Bill of Rights or who ratified the Constitution?
The D.C. gun ban suit was a chance to take on the Second Amendment with its reference to a militia, its awkward commas, its ambiguity.
The Supreme Court has agreed today to hear a case involving a controversial handgun ban in Washington, D.C.
I don't think the Supreme Court was backed into a corner to decide this case. I think there was enough folks on the court now with the change with the addition of Samuel Alito, so that they wanted to do it. And when
CBS News legal analyst Andrew Cohen.
The problem is you have a horribly drafted Second Amendment. The people who drafted the Second Amendment were just as addled and just as conflicted and contradictory as modern-day politicians are when it comes to these tough issues.
Constitutions are political documents, and constitutional amendments are political documents. They're written by politicians. They're shaped by the forces of politics.
R.B. Bernstein is a constitutional historian at New York Law School.
I'm tempted to say to originalists sometimes that you may believe that there is a Santa Claus bringing neatly wrapped packages of original intent, understanding, or meaning for good little constitutional interpreters, but just as there is no Santa Claus, there is no originalist Santa Claus. We do the best we can with the language we've got.
In fact, in this case, the court's interpretation of the Second Amendment is very much in line with public opinion. According to a recent Gallup poll, more than 7 out of 10 Americans agree with the Supreme Court ruling that the Second Amendment does guarantee the right to own a gun. But here's another statistic. Approximately 30,000 Americans are killed by guns every year. We asked Robert Levy, who brought about the Supreme Court decision, does it matter to you that people might die because of it?
Well, of course it matters, and I think it's indisputably true that there will be people who die because of this ruling. There will be other people who would have died were it not for this ruling. And so one has to take into account not just the costs, but the benefits.